The mining station floated like a tiny metal dot against the black of space. Their suits glowed with bright lights as they cut into the rock, searching for rare metals that would power ships across the galaxy. She turned back to the long table where humans and aliens sat across from each other. The air recyclers hummed quietly in the background. The Vakari Empire wanted to buy mining rights. Gina was there to make sure both sides understood each other perfectly. The Vakori delegation sat on one side of the table. They looked like giant lizards that had learned to walk on two legs. Their scales were dark green, and their eyes were yellow like old gold. The leader, Ambassador Vec, spoke in a voice that sounded like gravel falling down a metal tube. The Empire offers 12,000 credits per ton of extracted vanadium, Ambassador Vec said. His long tongue flicked out. To taste the air. G-Na listened carefully and then turned to Director Park, the human in charge of the mining operation. He says 12,000 per ton for the vanadium, sir. He had been running mining operations for 20 years. Tell him we need 15,000. That's our bottom price. The words felt strange in her mouth, full of hissing sounds and clicks. Vakari in their own language, too fast for Gina to follow completely. Behind the main Vakari group, a massive figure sat in the shadows. Gina had noticed him when the delegation first arrived. The other Vakari seemed to avoid looking at him directly. When they did speak to him, it was with short, sharp commands, like he was some kind of trained animal. The scarred Vakari never spoke. He just sat there, watching everything with intelligent eyes that seemed too smart for someone the others treated. Like a beast, we can agree to 14,000. Ambassador Vec finally said. Gina was about to translate when red lights began flashing throughout the station. A loud alarm screamed through the corridors. The mining station's communication system crackled to life. Unknown ships approaching fast. All personnel to emergency stations. Director Park jumped to his feet. What's happening? Through the conference room window, Gina could see strange ships appearing out of nowhere. They were dark and angular, like flying knives made of black metal. She had never seen ships like these before. The Threx horde has found us. The massive scarred Vakari stood up suddenly. For the first time, he spoke, and his voice was like an earthquake. We must leave now, but it was too late. The conference room's metal walls began to glow cherry red. Something was cutting through from the outside. Sparks showered down from the ceiling as the cutting beam finished its work. A section of the wall fell inward with a crash. Insect-like creatures poured through the hole. They moved on 6 legs and had 4 arms each. Each one carried weapons that hummed with dangerous energy. Director Park reached for the emergency button on the table, but a Threx warrior was faster. The alien's weapon fired a beam of crackling electricity as she raised them above her head. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. She had heard stories about the Threx horde. They were raiders who swept through space, taking whatever they wanted. They were said to be completely without mercy. Ambassador Vec tried to speak. We are a diplomatic mission. You cannot. A warrior hit him in the face with the butt of its weapon. No talking, the Threx leader hissed. They carried special restraints designed for different species. Gina felt cold metal clamps lock around her wrists. Restraints were too big for human hands. Gina's blood turned to ice. She knew what that meant. Through the corridors of the mining station, the miners who had been working outside were brought in, still wearing their cutting suits. The Threx herded all the prisoners toward. Their ships, the vessels, were even more frightening up close. They looked like they had been grown rather than built, with smooth surfaces that seemed almost alive. Inside the Tresmor ship, prisoners were shoved into metal cages barely big enough to stand in. Gina found herself next to the massive scarred Vakari up close. She could see that his scars were not just from battles. Others looked like torture marks. The Vakari looked down at her with those intelligent eyes. For a moment, Gina thought, he might say something. Instead, he turned away and stared at the wall. The ship's engines roared to life. Through a small window, Gina watched the mining station grow smaller until it was just another point of light in the darkness. She was leaving everything she had ever known, heading toward a place where she would probably die for the entertainment of creatures that saw her as nothing more than an animal. She closed her eyes and tried not to cry, but the tears came anyway, flowing silently down her cheeks as the Threx transport carried them all toward an uncertain and terrifying future. The underground cells smelled like fear and old blood. Gina sat on the cold metal floor, her back against the rough stone wall, lights that never turned off. The prison was carved deep into the rock beneath what the guards called the Grand Arena. Gina could sometimes hear the crowd above when the games were happening. The sound of thousands of voices cheering for death made her stomach sick. Her cell was small, maybe 3 steps wide and 4 steps long, but she was not alone down here. From her work as a translator, others were completely new to her. In the cell next to hers, a blue-skinned alien sat quietly. Gina had been trying to talk to him for 2 days. His name was Vec, and he came from a water world called Aquarius 7. His people were traders who traveled between the stars, selling rare pearls. Tomorrow, maybe the day after. Gina pressed her face against the metal bars that separated their cells. "Have you seen the arena before?" Vec's large black eyes looked sad. "They say few survive their first fight. The Threx like to watch us die." Across the narrow corridor, a creature that looked like a walking tree trunk snorted. His name was Grok, and he came from a high-gravity world where everything was built, thick and strong. "Stories," he rumbled, in a voice like falling rocks. "Human female talks too much. Save your energy for dying." Gina had been trying to talk to Grok since she arrived. A waste of time. "Maybe if we work together, we do not have to die," Gina said hopefully. Grok laughed, a sound like boulders rolling downhill. "Work together. You are small and soft. What can you do except make noise with your mouth?" Other prisoners had similar reactions when Gina tried to talk to them. There was Zex, a reptile creature with 6 arms who just hissed at her whenever she spoke, at Gina. But Gina kept trying. She had always believed that communication could solve problems. Even here, in this terrible place, she had to hope that understanding each other might help them survive. The worst part was not the aliens who ignored her. The worst part was the massive Vakari warrior who sat in the cell at the end of the corridor. They called him Korvax. Gina had learned his name from listening to the guards. The Threx talked about him like he was a valuable fighting animal. They said he had won dozens of arena battles. They said he was so violent that even other Vakari were afraid of him. Korvax never spoke to anyone. He just sat in his cell, staring at the wall with those intelligent eyes. Sometimes Gina caught him listening when she talked to the other prisoners, but he never joined the conversations. On the 4th day, Gina decided to try talking to him directly. Her pronunciation was not perfect, but she tried her best. "My name is Gina. I am from Earth." Korvax turned his huge head to look at her. His yellow eyes studied her for a long moment. The way he said it was dismissive, like he was talking to an insect. But Gina noticed something. His Vakari was different from Ambassador Vex. It was simpler, more basic, like he was having trouble with complex thoughts. "I know you probably think I am weak," Gina continued, "in Vakari. But maybe we can help each other. I have seen how smart you are. Your eyes show intelligence." Korvax made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. "Intelligence. No, I am weapon. I am made for killing. Nothing else matters." "That is not true," Gina said softly. "I watched you during the meeting on the mining station. You understood everything that was happening. You warned us about the Threx before anyone else realized the danger." For a moment, something flickered in Korvax's eyes. It was there and gone so fast that Gina almost missed it. But she was sure she had seen something, like recognition or surprise. Then his expression went blank again. "You see things that are not there. Save your breath for begging when they drag you to the arena." But Gina noticed that after their conversation, Korvax sometimes looked in her direction when she talked to the other prisoners. Vec told her about the coral cities of his homeworld, where buildings grew from the sea floor like living things. Grok eventually admitted that his people were miners, just like the humans on the station where they had been captured. Even some of the more hostile prisoners began to respond to her efforts. Zex, the 6-armed reptile, started answering simple questions. Nina, the metal-feathered flyer, told Gina about the wind currents of her Sky City home. "Why do you keep talking to everyone?" Vec asked one evening. "Most of us will be dead soon. What is the point of making friends? Because maybe if we understand each other, we can find a way to survive. And if we cannot survive, at least we will not die as strangers." Vec's large eyes blinked slowly. "That is either very wise or very foolish." It was Korvax, and he was talking to himself in the darkness. But he was not speaking Vakari. He was speaking in a language she had never heard before. The language sounded beautiful, nothing like the simple, harsh Vakari he spoke during the day. It sounded like poetry, or maybe a song without music. When morning came, Gina moved closer to the bars of her cell. "Korvax," she whispered. "That language you were speaking last night, what was it?" The big Vakari's head snapped toward her. For a moment, his eyes were wide with what looked like fear. Then his expression went hard again. "You heard nothing," he said coldly, but Gina had heard, and she was beginning to understand that there was much more to Korvax than anyone realized. The question was whether she could reach whatever was hidden beneath the surface before they were all thrown into the arena to die. The games were coming soon. Time was running out. The sound of the crowd was like thunder that never stopped. Gina stood in the dark tunnel that led to the arena floor. Through the metal gate ahead, she could see bright lights and hear thousands of voices screaming for blood. A Threx guard pushed her forward with the butt of his weapon. "Move, human." The crowd grows impatient. Behind her, Korvax walked silently. The massive Vakari had been quiet all morning, even more than usual. When the guards came to get them, he had not looked at Gina. He had not spoken at all. The past week had been horrible. Every day, prisoners were taken from their cells to fight in the arena. Most never came back. The few who did return were covered in wounds and spoke of terrible things. Arena floor Grok had been one of the first to fight. The big tree-like alien had faced 3 Threx warriors at once. Gina had heard the crowd cheering when he won. But when he came back to the cells, he was different, quieter. One of his thick arms was gone, cut off at the shoulder. "The crowd loves violence," Grok had told her, his voice even deeper than before. "They cheer loudest when we suffer." Vek had fought 2 days later. The blue-skinned traitor had been matched against some kind of flying creature with metal claws. He won, but barely. The scars on his face would never fade. Now it was Gina's turn. She had known this moment would come, but she was still not ready. How could anyone be ready to fight for their life while thousands watched and cheered? The worst part was that she would not be fighting alone. The arena masters had decided to pair her with Korvax. They called it the Beauty and the Beast, a small human female and a massive Vakari warrior. The crowd would love watching them fight together, or watching one of them die trying to protect the other. "Listen to me," Gina whispered to Korvax. As they walked through the tunnel, "We need to work together if we want to survive." Korvax did not answer. He just kept walking, his heavy footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The gate ahead of them began to rise. Bright sunlight poured through the opening, so bright that Gina had to cover her eyes. She had been underground for so long that she had forgotten what real sunlight looked like. Now entering the grand arena, a voice boomed from speakers hidden. In the walls, the human translator and the Vakari beast. Today, they faced the Razorpack. Gina stepped out onto the sand of the arena floor. The space was huge, bigger than a football field. High walls rose on all sides, covered with seats full of screaming aliens. To watch her die, the sand beneath her feet was stained dark with old blood. Scattered around the arena were pieces of metal and stone, probably from previous battles. Some looked like they might be useful as weapons or shields. Across the arena, a gate on the opposite side began to open. "What is the Razorpack?" Gina asked Korvax. The big Vakari finally looked at her. His yellow eyes were cold, but she thought she saw something else there too. Maybe concern. "Hunting beasts," he said simply. "Fast, sharp, work together like pack of wolves." The creatures that came out of the opposite gate were like nothing Gina had ever seen. They moved on 4 legs, but their bodies were covered in what looked like natural armor made of razor-sharp scales. Each one was about the size of a large dog, but their heads were full of teeth that gleamed like knives. There were 6 of them. They spread out across the arena, moving with the coordination of animals that had hunted together for years. Their eyes were fixed on Gina and Korvax. "Stay behind me," Korvax said quietly. "No," Gina replied, surprising herself with how steady. Her voice sounded, "We work together, or we both die." The crowd noise grew louder. Someone was speaking in the Threx language, probably explaining the rules of the fight. Gina caught some words: "No weapons, fight until death, glory to the survivors." The razor pack began to move. They did not rush forward like wild animals. 2 went left, 2 went right, and 2 stayed in the center. "They are trying to split us up," Gina said. "If we stay together, they cannot surround us." Korvax looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "You understand tactics?" "I understand teamwork," Gina replied. "I also understand that 6 against 2 is bad odds unless we are smart about it." The first attack came from the left. One of the razor beasts leaped toward Gina, its claws extended and its mouth open wide. But instead of running away, Gina dropped to the ground and rolled toward a piece of broken metal she had spotted earlier. At the same moment, Korvax moved. The massive Vakari was faster than anything that big should be able to move. He caught the leaping razor beast in midair with both hands and threw it hard against the arena wall. The creature hit with a wet sound and did not get up. "One down," Gina said, grabbing the piece of metal. They had expected easy prey, a weak human and a single fighter. They had not expected coordination, but they adapted quickly. The remaining 5 beasts attacked at once, coming from all directions. Korvax roared, a sound that shook the arena walls. But this time, instead of charging forward like a mindless beast, he stayed close to Gina. When the razor beasts tried to circle around behind them, he moved to block them. When they attacked from the front, Gina ducked low and struck with her makeshift weapon while Korvax fought from above. They moved together like dancers, each one covering the other's weaknesses. Gina was small and quick, able to dodge attacks and strike at vulnerable spots. Korvax was strong and tough, able to take hits that would have killed her and deliver blows that sent the razor beasts flying. The crowd was going wild. This was not what they had expected to see. Instead of watching a human die quickly, they were seeing a real fight. Another razor beast fell, its neck broken by Korvax's powerful hands. Then another, stabbed through the eye by Gina's metal blade. While Korvax held it still, the last 2 beasts tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The arena walls were too high to climb, and the gates were sealed shut. They had to keep fighting until one side was dead. When it was over, Gina and Korvax stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard and covered in blood. Most of the blood was not their own. Around them lay the bodies of the razor pack. The crowd was screaming louder than ever. They had expected to see the human die. Instead, they had seen something unprecedented, true cooperation between 2 completely different species. As the guards came to escort them back to the cells, Gina looked up at Korvax. The massive Vakari was looking down at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was not the cold, distant look he usually wore. It was something warmer, something that looked almost like respect. "Thank you," she said quietly, was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was different than before, softer somehow. It was the first time he had said anything that sounded like a compliment. As they walked back through the tunnel toward their cells, Gina realized that something had changed between them. The massive alien who had dismissed her words as meaningless had just risked his life to protect her. Maybe her words had meant something after all. The medical bay was a small, dirty room carved into the rock beneath the arena. Gina sat on a metal table while a Threx medical drone cleaned the cuts on her arms. The machine worked without care, its metal claws rough against her skin. Sat on another table nearby. His wounds were much worse than hers. 3 deep gashes ran across his back where the razor beasts had managed to reach him. Blue blood seeped through the bandages the medical drone had applied. "You should have let me take more hits," Gina said quietly. "You are hurt because you protected me." Korvax looked at her with those yellow eyes. "I am built to take damage." "You are not," the medical drone finished with Gina and moved away. She slid off the table and walked over to Korvax. Up close, she could see that his wounds were not healing as fast as they should. Vakari were supposed to heal quickly, but something was wrong. "May I look at your back?" she asked. Korvax was quiet for a moment, then nodded. He turned around, and Gina gasped at what she saw. His back was covered in scars, not just from recent fights, but old ones that looked like they had been made by medical tools. Some were straight lines, like surgical cuts. Others were small, round marks, like someone had been putting needles into his spine. "Who did this to you?" Gina whispered. "Threx scientists," Korvax said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Before the arena, they wanted to make me better fighter." Gina felt sick. She had basic medical training from her work on mining stations, and she knew what she was looking at. These were not battle scars. These were experiment scars. They did surgery on your brain, she said, her voice full of horror. Yes. They said I was too intelligent, made me think too much in battle. So they changed me. Changed you? How? Korvax was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. They made the anger stronger, made it hard to think about other things. Fighting became easier. Everything else became harder. Words became difficult. Now Gina understood why his speech was so simple compared to other Vicari. The Threx had damaged his brain to make him a better gladiator. They had turned a thinking being into a weapon. That language you spoke in the cell, she said gently. The beautiful one. That was your real language, was it not? Korvax's whole body went still. You should not have heard that. But I did hear it, and it was beautiful. It sounded like poetry. Poetry, Korvax repeated the word, like he was tasting something he had not eaten in years. Yes, my people. ... We were poets once before the wars, before I became this. Gina moved around to face him. You are still a poet. The surgery did not take that away completely. I can see it in your eyes when you listen to conversations. You understand more than you let anyone know. Understanding does not matter if I cannot speak it, Korvax said sadly. Then I will help you speak it again. For the next several days, whenever they were not fighting in the arena, Gina worked with Korvax. She started with simple exercises, helping him remember words he had lost. She asked him about his homeworld, his family, his life before the Threx captured him. It was slow work. The brain damage made it hard for him to find complex words. Sometimes he would get frustrated and stop talking entirely, but Gina was patient. She had learned patience from years of translating between species who thought very differently from each other. Tell me about your home, she said one evening, as they sat in their cells. Home. Korvax closed his eyes. Green world. 2 suns. The morning sun was gold. The evening sun was red. Made the sky look like fire and honey. His words were still simple, but there was something different about the way he said them. There was feeling in his voice. What did you do there? I was teacher. Taught young ones about the old poems, about the time before wars, when Vac made art instead of weapons. You were a teacher, Gina repeated, amazed. Not a warrior at all. No, never wanted to be warrior. But when the Horde War started, all adult males had to fight. I was captured in my first battle. Very bad warrior then. Only became good killer after the surgery. Gina felt angry at the injustice of it. The Threx had taken a teacher, a poet, and turned him into a beast for their entertainment. But they had not been completely successful. The real Korvax was still in there, hidden beneath the damage they had done. Over the following days, their conversations grew longer and more complex. Korvax began to remember words he had lost. He started to speak in longer sentences. Sometimes, late at night, Gina would hear him reciting poetry in his own language, his voice growing stronger each time. Why do you help me? He asked one day. Because everyone deserves to be themselves, Gina answered. The Threx tried to steal who you really are. That is wrong. But helping me does not help you survive the arena. Maybe it does. When you can think clearly, you fight smarter. When you fight smarter, we both live longer. It was true. As Korvax's mind cleared, he became an even more dangerous opponent. But not because he was more violent. He became dangerous. Because he could plan, could think several moves ahead, could use strategy instead of just brute force. In their next arena battle, they faced a group of Threx warriors. Instead of charging forward like a mindless beast, Korvax used the arena terrain to set traps. He communicated with Gina in whispers, coordinating their attacks. They won so easily that the crowd was disappointed. The Threx warriors never had a chance against opponents who could think and plan together. The surgery was supposed to make me better fighter, Korvax said afterward, but they were wrong. It made me worse. A mind that cannot think cannot truly fight. The mind is the most important weapon, Gina agreed. That night, Korvax spoke to her in his own language for the first time. The words were like music, full of complex sounds and flowing rhythms. When he finished, he translated for her. It was a poem about hope, he said. about finding light in dark places, about meeting someone who reminds you who you used to be. Gina felt tears in her eyes. That was beautiful. You gave it back to me, Korvac said quietly. The surgery took my words, but you helped me find them again. For that, I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You do not owe me anything. We help each other. That is what friends do. Friends, Korvac repeated the word thoughtfully. Yes, I had forgotten that word too, but I remember it now. From that night forward, everything was different between them. They were no longer just two prisoners trying to survive. They were friends, each one helping the other become whole again. But Gina knew their time was running out. The arena masters were planning something special. She had heard the guards talking about a grand spectacle, a final battle that would be impossible for anyone to survive. Their friendship had made them both stronger, but would it be enough for what was coming? The arena trials came faster now. Every few days, Gina and Korvac were called to fight new opponents. Word had spread among the Threks about the unusual partnership between the human translator and the Vakari warrior. Crowds came from across the Threks' territory to see them fight. But something else was spreading too. In the dark cells beneath the arena, the other prisoners were beginning to change. It started with Vek, the blue-skinned traitor. After watching Gina and Korvac work together so well, he asked if she could help him communicate with his own fighting partner. The arena masters had paired him with Zex, the six-armed reptile who barely spoke to anyone. Zex does not trust me, Vek told Gina through the bars of his cell. He thinks I will betray him to save myself. But if we do not work together, we will both die in the next trial. Gina spent hours talking to both aliens, learning their languages and helping them understand each other. It was not easy. Vek's people valued cooperation and shared effort. Zex's species believed that strength came from independence and self-reliance. Your people and his people think differently, Gina explained to Vek. To him, working together feels like admitting weakness. You need to show him that cooperation is actually a form of strength. She taught Vek some basic words in Zex's language, phrases that emphasized respect and mutual benefit rather than dependence. She helped Zex understand that Vek was not trying to control him, but to fight alongside him as an equal. When their trial came, Vek and Zex fought like they had been partners for years. They used their different abilities to complement each other. Vek's quick movements and Zex's multiple arms created a fighting style that confused and overwhelmed their opponents. The crowd loved it, but more importantly, both aliens survived. How? Did you know how to help them? Korvac asked Gina that night. Every species has their own way of thinking, she replied. When I was a translator, I learned that understanding why someone thinks differently is more important than just knowing their words. Word of Gina's success spread through the prison. More and more alien prisoners began asking for her help. Soon, she was spending most of her time moving between cells, learning new languages and helping different species understand each other. Grok, the tree-like alien who had once told her that talking was useless, became one of her most frequent students. Despite losing his arm in his first trial, he was paired with Nina, the metal-feathered flyer. For the next round of games, flying creature thinks too fast, Grok complained to Gina. Makes plans, changes plans, makes new plans, cannot keep up with all the thinking. Her species lives in the sky, Gina explained. They have to think fast, because everything around them is always moving. Your species lives on solid ground. You think carefully because you can take time to make good decisions. She helped them find a middle ground. Nina would scout and report what she saw, but she would wait for Grok's careful analysis before they acted. Grok would make the strategic decisions, but he would trust Nina's quick reactions when things went wrong. Their partnership worked so well that they defeated their opponents without either of them getting seriously hurt, as more and more prisoners began working together successfully. The arena masters noticed the change. The Threks who ran the games were confused. Gladiator fights were supposed to be about individual strength and violence. They were not supposed to be about cooperation and strategy. The human female is causing problems. Gina heard one of the guards say, in broken standard language, prisoners are not dying fast enough. Crowd gets bored when everyone survives. Then, we need to make harder trials, another guard replied, tests that teamwork cannot solve. But even as the trials became more dangerous, The prisoners continued to survive. Gina had created something that the Threx did not understand and could not easily stop. She had built a community. The aliens who had once been strangers, who had spoken different languages and followed different customs, were now working together like a family. They shared information about their opponents, helped heal each other's wounds, and planned strategies for upcoming battles. "You have done something amazing," Korvax told her one evening. "These beings who could barely look at each other before are now willing to die for each other." "They were always capable of this," Gina replied. "They just needed someone to help them see it." "No, they needed you to show them how to see it. This is what humans do, is it not? You bring others together." Gina thought about that. Maybe. On Earth, we have a saying, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." When different people work together, they can accomplish things that none of them could do alone. "Your species understands something that others do not," Korvax said thoughtfully. "Most beings think strength comes from being better than others. Humans think strength comes from making others better." As the days passed, the community in the prison grew stronger. Prisoners who had never spoken before were now teaching each other useful skills. Vec showed others how to move quietly. Grok taught them how to analyze their opponent's weaknesses. Nina demonstrated techniques for avoiding attacks. Even the prisoners who were not scheduled to fight yet were contributing. They watched the trials from their cells and reported back about what they observed. They helped plan strategies for upcoming battles. They shared food and medical supplies. Gina realized that something unprecedented was happening. She had not just helped a few aliens learn to communicate. She had created the first multi-species alliance in the history of the Threx. Arena. But the Arena Masters were not going to allow this to continue. She could see it in the way they looked at her, in the way they whispered when they thought she could not hear. "They are planning something special for us," she told Korvax. "Something that will make an example of what happens when prisoners work together too well." "Let them plan," Korvax replied, his yellow eyes bright with intelligence. "We will be ready." "How can you be so confident?" "Because you have taught me something important. They made me into a weapon by taking away my ability to think. But you gave it back to me. Now I am not just a weapon anymore. I am a warrior who can plan, who can adapt, who can protect what matters to him. What matters to you?" Korvax looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You, and all the others you have helped. This family you have built, I will not let them destroy it." That night, Gina lay awake thinking about what Korvax had said. A family. That was exactly what they had become. Not just prisoners thrown together by circumstance, but beings who genuinely cared about each other's survival and well-being. She had always believed that communication could solve problems, but she had never imagined that it could create something like this, a bond between species that had never worked together before, a community built on understanding and mutual respect. Tomorrow, the Arena Masters would probably announce their special trial. Whatever they had planned, it would be designed to break the unity she had helped create. They would try to force the prisoners to choose between their own survival and the survival of their friends. But Gina was not worried. She had learned something important too. The Arena Masters thought they understood violence and death, but they did not understand the human spirit, and they did not understand what happened when that spirit was shared with others. They were about to find out. The announcement came at dawn. Threx guards marched through the prison corridors, their weapons humming with energy. They stopped at every cell and spoke the same message in broken standard language. "Today is special trial. All prisoners will watch. The human female and the beast warrior will face the elite guard. If they win, all prisoners get better food for 1 month. If they lose, executions will begin." Gina felt her blood turn to ice. The elite guard were the Threx's best warriors, the ones who protected their leaders and led their armies. She had heard stories about them from other prisoners. They were faster, stronger, and better equipped than regular Threx soldiers. Worse, the Arena Masters had made this trial about more than just her and Korvax. By promising rewards for all prisoners if they won, and threatening executions if they lost, the Threx had turned every alien in the prison into an audience with a personal stake in the outcome. "They want to break the unity you have built," Korvax said quietly as they were led through the tunnels toward the arena. "They think that if you die fighting for others, the community will fall apart from guilt and fear." "Maybe they are right," Gina replied, her voice shaking. I never meant to put everyone else at risk. You gave us hope that was worth any risk. The arena was different today. Instead of the usual sand floor, the Threx had built a complex obstacle. Of course, there were walls to climb, pits to avoid, and platforms at different heights. Scattered throughout were weapons, swords, spears, and energy blasters, but most were placed in dangerous locations that would be hard to reach. Above them, suspended in metal cages, were all the other prisoners: Vec, Grok, Nina, Zex, and dozens of others she had helped over the past weeks. They could see everything that happened, but they could not help. Look up there, Korvax said, pointing to the cages. They are not just watching. They are hoping. You gave them something to believe in. Do not take that away from them by doubting yourself now. The gate across the arena opened, and the elite guard entered. There were 6 of them, twice as many as usual for a trial. Each one was larger than normal Threx, their black shells polished to a mirror shine. They carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy and moved with the precision of soldiers who had trained together for years. The crowd fell silent. Even the bloodthirsty Threx spectators seemed to understand that this was something special. This was not just entertainment. This was a statement about what happened to prisoners who dared to work together. Remember what I taught you about strategy, Gina whispered to Korvax as they waited for the signal to begin. Remember what you taught me about hope, he whispered back. The signal came, a loud horn that echoed through the arena. The elite guard began to move immediately, spreading out to surround their targets. But instead of rushing forward, they advanced slowly and carefully. Using the obstacle course to their advantage, Gina and Korvax ran for the nearest cover, a low wall that offered protection from energy weapons. The first blaster shots seared the air where they had been standing, leaving glowing marks on the arena floor. They are not taking chances, Korvax observed. They plan to end this quickly. Then we cannot give them time to execute their plan. Gina spotted an energy rifle on a platform about 10 feet above them. The platform was supported by a single metal beam that looked like it might break if hit hard enough. Can you reach that weapon? She asked. Korvax looked where she was pointing. Yes, but I would be exposed to their fire. Not if I create a distraction. Before Korvax could stop her, Gina ran out from behind their cover. She sprinted toward a group of obstacles on the other side of the arena, drawing the attention of half the elite guard. Energy blasts exploded around her as she dove and rolled. Between barriers, while the guards were focused on her, Korvax leaped up and grabbed the platform. His weight, combined with a powerful pull, brought the whole structure crashing down. He caught the energy rifle as it fell and immediately began returning fire. But the elite guard adapted quickly. 2 of them continued pursuing Gina, while the other 4 concentrated their fire on Korvax. The big Vicari was tough, but even he could not survive the concentrated energy blasts of 4 elite warriors. Gina saw what was happening. In seconds, Korvax would be overwhelmed. She had to do something, but she was on the wrong side of the arena with 2 guards closing in on her position. That was when she heard the voices. From the cages above, the other prisoners were shouting, not just random noise, but coordinated information. They were calling out the positions of the elite guard, warning her and Korvax about attacks they could not see coming. Behind you, left side, Vec's voice, called out in standard language, to coming from your right, Grok's deep rumble, added. Energy rifle on the platform above Korvax, Nina's quick voice chirped. The prisoners had become her eyes and ears. Even trapped in their cages, they were still part of the team. Using their information, Gina managed to stay ahead of her pursuers long enough to reach another weapon cache. She grabbed a plasma sword, its blade crackling with energy, and turned to face the guards chasing her. She was not a trained warrior like Korvax, but she had learned a lot from watching arena battles. More importantly, she had something the elite guard did not expect: intelligence and adaptability. Instead of trying to match their strength, she used the obstacle course against them. She lured one guard into a narrow space where he could not maneuver properly, then struck at his joints where his armor was weakest. She used the momentum from dodging one attack to launch herself into position for a counterattack against another guard. Meanwhile, Korvax was fighting like a force of nature. The restored intelligence Gina had helped him recover, combined with his enhanced physical abilities, made him devastating. He used every piece of terrain, every weapon he could find, and every bit of tactical information the prisoners above called out to him. But there were still too many enemies, and both Gina and Korvax were taking damage. Gina had cuts on her arms and legs, and one of Korvax's shoulders was burned from an energy blast. That was when the worst happened. Gina was fighting 2 elite guards at once when a third one appeared behind her. She heard Nina's warning cry from above, but it was too late. The guard's energy spear caught her in the side, and she fell to the arena floor with a scream of pain. The wound was bad. She could feel blood flowing freely, and when she tried to stand, her legs would not support her weight. The 3 guards stood over her, their weapons raised for the killing blow. From across the arena, Korvax saw what was happening. Gina, the small human who had given him back his mind and his soul, was about to die. Something inside him broke, not the mechanical breaking of his neural modifications, but something deeper, something primal and pure, and utterly beyond the Threk scientists' ability to control or understand. Korvax roared. It was not the artificial battle cry his surgery had programmed into him. It was the sound of a being who had found something worth protecting and would destroy anything that threatened it. It was the sound of love transformed into fury. The roar shook the entire arena. In the cages above, prisoners covered their ears. In the stands, Threk spectators fell silent with instinctive fear. What happened next would be talked about for years afterward. Korvax moved like a creature possessed, but possessed by choice rather than programming. He tore through the remaining elite guards with his bare hands, his movements too fast and too violent for their training to counter. He ripped weapons from their grasp and turned them against their owners. He used pieces of the obstacle course. As clubs and spears, he fought not like a programmed weapon, but like someone defending his family. When the last elite guard fell, Korvax rushed to Gina's side. His massive hands were gentle as he lifted her, careful not to worsen her injuries. "I am here," he said softly, his voice breaking with emotion. "You are safe now." Gina looked up at him through eyes cloudy with pain. "Did we win?" "Yes, we won." Them, the caged prisoners, were cheering. Not the bloodthirsty cheering of a typical arena crowd, but the joyful celebration of a family whose members had survived against impossible odds. But as Korvax carried Gina toward the medical station, he could see that her wound was very serious. She had given everything to protect the community she had built, and now she might die because of it. The thought of losing her filled him with a rage even deeper than what he had felt during the battle. The Threks had taken his mind once, had turned him into a weapon. Now they had hurt the one person who had helped him become himself again. That could not be forgiven. Gina woke up in the medical bay 3 days later, weak. Korvax sat beside her bed, and she was shocked by what she saw. The massive Vakari looked different. The scars from his neural surgery were still there, but something in his eyes had changed completely. In its place was intelligence, warmth, and something else she had never seen before. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked. 3 days. "The doctor said you lost a lot of blood. I was ... worried." His voice was different, too. The simple, broken speech was gone. He spoke now with the full complexity and beauty that she had heard. In his poetry, those nights in the cell, "What happened to you?" she whispered. Korvax was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "When I saw you dying, something broke inside me. The rage I felt was so pure, so focused, that it burned away the last of what they did to my mind. The neural modifications are gone. I can think clearly now, speak clearly, remember everything they tried to make me forget. I am myself again, fully myself, for the first time in years. Rest. You are still healing. What about the others? Are they safe?" "They are more than safe." After our victory, the Threks did not know what to do. They had never seen before beings from different species working together and surviving against impossible odds. Had seen it? They know now that cooperation is not just possible, it is powerful. They are not the same beings who were captured weeks ago, not just planning to survive the next trial, but planning to escape, all of them, together. Are not individuals anymore. We are a community, a family, with dozens of different skills and abilities. Vec knows about ship navigation. Grok understands engineering. Was not just intelligence or determination. It was love, pure and simple and utterly devoted. I know how to fight. Over the next few days, as Gina recovered, she learned about the plan the prisoners had developed. It was complex and dangerous, but it was also brilliant. Each species would contribute their unique abilities to a coordinated escape. Attempt. The plan would begin during the next major arena event, when most of the guards would be focused on crowd control. A blackout. In the darkness, Grok would use his strength to break open the cell doors. "What about the guards?" Gina asked. "That is my part," Korvac said simply. "You cannot fight all of them alone. I will not be alone. Some of the other prisoners are warriors too, but more importantly, I will not be fighting just to destroy. I will be fighting to protect. There is a difference." The night before the escape attempt, Korvac sat beside Gina's bed and spoke to her in his own language. It was a poem about finding light in darkness. He said, "About meeting someone who changes everything. You gave me the ability to create beauty again. I could only destroy. Now I can protect, I can build, I can love." "Love." Korvac took her small hand in his massive one, holding it with infinite gentleness. "You are the most important thing in my life. Showed me how to be myself again, though you did that too. But because you saw something in me that no one else saw, you were always a teacher, a poet, a protector. Wow, and you helped me find it again. Keep building communities. Keep bringing different species together. Keep showing others what you showed me. And determination, I promise." During the chaos of a major gladiator tournament, the prisoners put their plan into action. Grok and several other strong prisoners broke down the cell doors. Zex used his knowledge of Threx systems to disable alarms and security cameras. Even in the dark, they began to organize a response. Guards with night vision equipment started hunting the escaped prisoners. Not a mindless beast, not a programmed weapon, but a warrior with a cause. He fought with intelligence and strategy, using the fortress itself against its defenders. Escaped prisoners had advantages the Threx did not expect. More importantly, they were fighting for their freedom and for each other, captive in the entire fortress. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species crowded into the stolen Threx transport ships. As their ship lifted off from the fortress, Gina looked back at the place that had been their prison. It was burning now, its defenses broken by the coordinated attack of species that had learned to work together. But what about after? What happens when we reach safe territory? Species can work together. We keep proving that cooperation is stronger than violence. Gina leaned back in her seat and smiled. Her words, which had once seemed meaningless to everyone around her, had started something that would change the galaxy. That communication and understanding were not signs of weakness, a love deeper than any language could express. With someone who had chosen to protect her, not because he was programmed to. Heading toward human territory and safety, Gina realized that this was just the beginning. The community they had built in the Threx arena would spread. Other species would learn what they had learned. The galaxy would never be the same. Her words had meant everything after all.